lot of Microsoft knowledge.
Yeah, they're often used way above, outside, not part of the
Well, yeah, but they talk
Yeah, the guy
from
would.
UCS to another.
Right, it's outside.
Yeah, but it's outside. But it's, to me, it's all part of it, you know. I mean, the whole picture is that you can have several of these things and tie them all together.
But you can tie them all together with a D-Link or an Assist or an HP switch or something you can try. It won't work as well, probably. But that's, you wouldn't plug a D-Link switch in and plug a UCS and then go to Cisco. And say it's from UCS because you plug UCS.
Well, I know that the XLAN and PTO or something like that, it's, so you talk from one place to another. In layer 3, layer 2 is encapsulated. Layer 2, I just wondered if these Nexus switches, that part of their operation, are really efficient in doing that. So that's
so, but you're out of my area. I don't pretend to know.
There's probably stuff on Cisco.com that test covers those.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's, you know, I'm digging into it.
Can you find out a way to scroll it down?
Because I get more.
Find out to scroll that down.
It's
Open
easy
up
to say, we
the,
just look into it. It's not that.
It might be easier than putting it in the wrong bucket.
yeah.
Is it okay if these are closed? Voting.
UCS, I guess they connect together. Doesn't mean they exclusively connect together, right? You can connect.
Well, Cisco, like
There
that.
are companies that
Okay.
there are companies that have 5,000 and 7,000 and already use UCS.
Oh, yeah, I realize that,
And those people never talk to the UCS people because it's a completely different product.
But see, I just want to say with Cisco products, at least initially, because, you know, I know that they work for, and I don't want to spend hours.
Well, you can
I know that they work together.
You can run UC on UCS and hook up a VoIP phone. That doesn't mean that the UCS team is going to have a VoIP phone. Even though they're connected to the same it's just, you know, the 5,000, 7,000.
What is the MD?
That's MDF.
Is that a part of the speakers?
This is fiber channel switching.
So fiber channel. So that is probably a good
It is 8 switches now. NetApp doesn't do switches.
No,
They are a company. It depends on your business. I met with 15 different storage companies last week. So it all depends on what you're trying to do. It depends on what you're trying to do.
I would love to hear this. I think that's just a year I got to know Mike, not inside. Although I do know they're using it.
Inexpensive and NetApp tend not to use their
Hey, can you talk here to see whether you're working?
You might want to
Can you
talk with
talk?
our.
Just
Check on Jabber to check.
It depends on what you're trying to do.
can you talk this?
Testing 1, 2, 3. No. You can't hear it.
It's not good.
A large media.
What?
What do you mean it's not good? You can't hear it?
Maybe my AirPods not good. You see?
Can you unmute in your system if you're muted?
No, I didn't mute it.
Maybe the volume is low.
Volume's low. Is it?
Maybe your headphones.
It's not good.
Yeah.
Maybe she's changing another headphone. I have another one.
There are about 30 networks. I don't know what it is.
My handwriting is terrible. Yeah. The team is there on Wi-Fi?
From home?
No.
Wi-Fi? Yeah, you can ask the receptionist.
Up there. Downstairs is just the program.
Hello, hello.
So that's our email that will go to. So you just want me to address it to me, to directly. Okay. Yeah. So you just want to yours. So, want me to get my headphones?
This one actually.
Oh, it works now? Is it good?
Yeah.
Sorry. It's actually take off all your and that is I just turned it on. So keep going. That's right.
It's not really a hard metric, but from the business perspective, you can say, okay, if we're, if my group is using their lighting, here's kind of true, there's true listening of all the sources. So if you're and it has some companies that can so you can call in just any company. Any company that's or data is going to be or the equation. What is an MDF?
Rather confused for something. I will.
So it's like,
Yeah,
Quick question.
I control slides, no problem.
Yeah.
The demo. How will that be controlled?
The demo is here. I have the demo. Yeah,
Okay.
I have the. Yeah, maybe it just you just play, right?
Yeah, okay.
And then you talk.
Now, have all that power data, metadata.
Things good.
So kind of stuff.
It's a little tilted. You think?
Huh?
It looks a little bit tilted.
Yeah.
I can make it go back.
Yeah.
What was that? Oh, that's a video. I thought that was a feed.
Yeah.
How they including promoting travel, tourism, and support the food, okay, food stuff. All the secret stuff. For me, if they want to, someone wants to
That fast moving
food
space.
start from there.
There's lots of responsibilities. you find this company.
Yeah. All of you, some of them. More of it.
Is you're trying to do this across all of
I
our.
do. They should protect the law.
Now, are you all in these monitors? So it's like a name that came up.
I think, same more minutes.
Santa Cruz guy. Next door to the Cisco.
Right? So we can leave the computers?
Yeah.
Why not? You think it'll go to sleep? Are you afraid? It might go to sleep.
Maybe a few minutes. No. Just keep it there.
Ammonia. Yeah.
See you. Cool. Have a seat, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. Could you actually have a seat? Thank you. You don't have enough seats? Yeah. There's more seats here. We have a few extra chairs in the back. Yeah. I go get a seat. There's 4 chairs right there. Oh, okay. There's 4 chairs right there. Yeah. Thank you. Just a few seconds. Okay, good afternoon, and welcome to this Cisco Support Community Meetup. Thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. My name is Sam Knapp, and I am the event manager for the Cisco Support Community. I'm joined by my colleague Chin-Ying Huang and Oliver over there taking pictures. It's my honor today to introduce our speaker, Jacob. Jacob is going to deliver a topic on unified computing, which is what you're here for. He's a product manager. And he'll present UCS Central product and related Cisco data center solutions. After Jacob presents, we'll have a Q&A session. And then we'll also hear a few words from Gopi, who's the VP of Technology from WinMax. He'll give us a brief overview of services and solutions. And there will also be a raffle at the end. Some of you have already dropped off your business cards or written your name and dropped it in the box. We're going to have a drawing for Beats by Dre earphones. So make sure you drop your name in and stick around for the drawing. And so now, without further ado, Jacob?
Okay, thank you. Any chance that somebody could bring some Beats by Dre stock instead? It looks like Apple's buying them. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacob Van Ewijk. I'm part of the product management team within the Unified Computing System group at Cisco. In particular, I've been focusing on our UCS Central product, which is the topic for today for the last year. I also helped do some of the product management on the UCS Manager releases. I believe there was a session like this back in February, could be wrong about the date, or March, specifically on UCS Manager, where my manager and some of my colleagues presented. But today, the topic is UCS Central. So first of all, how many people here are familiar with UCS Central? A few hands, okay. Related top question, how many people here have UCS in general? Hopefully more hands, no? A few more? And of those who have UCS, how many of you have more than one domain? A couple, okay. This is really where UCS Central starts to come into play. So, one of the great things about UCS is it's a completely integrated system, top to bottom. We get our servers, our fabric interconnects, and all the software definition. The software definition is best described actually as one of these devices, right? If I drop this device, what do I do and break it? I go to my vendor, and they pull out a little piece of hardware, the SIM card, and basically transfer the entire personality to another piece of hardware. And essentially, that's what we do with our servers and the storage connections, the network connections, the whole server personality within UCS. We make that completely defined as part of a service profile, defined in software, instead of being defined by, for instance, UUIDs being burnt into the motherboard, or MAC addresses being burnt into a network card that are fixed. We can move them around because they're defined as a service profile. This completely integrated system has a management tool called UCS Manager. That's really the core of the unified computing system. That's how you set everything up. You set up your policies, your profiles, and you do all your management there. One of the limitations of UCS is that it is limited to a pair of fabric interconnects. And those fabric interconnects can hang at most 160 servers off there. Also, another limitation, of course, is it's one location. So, if you have more than 160 servers, or if you want to have multiple locations, or if some of our larger customers, what they find is they tend to do 80 servers in a pod, because when you take that plus the storage, the network connectivity, and everything you get, for a lot of customers, that's one row in a data center. And they essentially buy one domain for each row in their data center. And that's how it gets set up. Well, that brings the next question then, of course, is, so if I've got a whole bunch of these, for that matter, if I've got one, even, there's some limitations to this because it's built on the Fabric Interconnect hardware. Can I get something a little better? Can I get more functionality out of it? And then two, what if I have more than one domain? How do I manage it? How do I keep consistency? How do I make sure I'm standardized across that, whether it's different rows in the data center, or I've got 10 servers in one data center and 10 servers in another data center. I want consistency back and forth between two different data centers for redundancy. All of those questions, and that's where the UCS Central product comes in to the Cisco management stack. Above that, you get UCS Director. That's not a topic for today, but if there's people interested, we could potentially address it another time. UCS Director is more of the orchestration engine. So that's where you get into not just how do I set up a server and a service profile that goes with it, how do I set up my OS? How do I interact with VMware and set up virtual machines? How do I build custom workflows and run them end to end for everything that I need to do? One other thing, and this is true all the way up and down the stack, from the standalone controller in a rack mount server to blades or rack mounts in a domain, up to UCS Manager, up to Central, up to Director. One of the things that was unique when UCS started shipping 5 years ago was that it had an API on it, an XML-based API. The SDK is published, and one of the advantages of that is, if you need to script something that's a little unique, that's not a default feature in a product, you can do that. You need to tweak it to make it work exactly the way you want it to work in your environment, you can do that. I spent many years in the server business, mostly on the system management side. This is the first time I've seen an openly published API. Now, some of the other vendors are starting to come around to that thinking, but this was the first place that it became very popular. And these APIs aren't just used, published and said, okay, customers will use them. This is actually how we do our management between the products as well. So it's not just for customer use, it's also used internally. So that means it's robust. We use these APIs every day in our management tools to link them together. And in addition, there's a bunch of tools not shown on here. But if you do development in PowerShell and want scripting, we've got a Power tool. Some of the nice things about that, you can actually go run something in the GUI in UCS Manager, and it will run a program on the side that translates all of that into PowerShell code for you. So you can just copy the PowerShell code out, tweak it, run it somewhere else. By the way, if anybody's into PowerShell scripting, there is actually a contest until next week, I think, going on for Cisco UCS PowerShell scripting. So for anybody who's interested in that. But today, the focus is UCS Central. And so we'll take a deeper dive in there. So at a high level, what does it do? It's based on and still uses UCS Manager to actually do all the tasks. And therefore, its functionality is based on what UCS Manager can deliver. There's a hierarchy. And for those familiar with UCS Manager, it looks much the same. Although we've added some extra concepts we'll talk about. You can see faults across all of your domains instead of having to log into each domain individually to get them. Equipment, inventory, status, across many domains, many servers, starting to talk, if you wanted to, hundreds and thousands of servers instead of a max of 160. So why would you use it? Even for those customers who only have a single UCS domain, there is value in using UCS Central. The first part is an information dashboard. So UCS Central runs as a virtual machine. It means it runs on a server with CPU, memory, storage. One of the things that means is it can store a lot more data than we can store on a Fabric interconnect that's running network traffic through and management stuff for a UCS environment. So first place you can get value is just by registering. Is you get the inventory, you get all the centralized faults and logs, and while UCS keeps bandwidth statistics and power statistics and fan speed statistics and temperature statistics for 24 hours, because this runs as a VM, either with an internal or external database, we can keep 2 weeks or a year or more worth of statistics. So the first value you get, even on a single domain, is that you get statistics for a lot longer time, gives you much better visibility into your environment, better troubleshooting, much better able to answer questions like, do I have enough connections between my cards to my chassis to my Fabric interconnects, and out of them, am I running out of bandwidth? Or how much power am I consuming? And being able to compare systems from different areas. That's the first thing people do. And by the way, this is giving no control and actually not even controlling anything from UCS Central. It's just being used as an information dashboard. I had the chance to go visit a bunch of customers using UCS Central in production last fall. And the next thing was something that every single one of them did. And that is one of the things you can do with UCS Central is schedule and back up your UCS Manager instance as well as your UCS Central instance. And do that as a scheduled backup. And once again, make this a policy that spans your entire UCS environment. Turns out this was something every single one of those customers did. So we highlight that there. It's kind of the next thing most customers do. Third step, as people become more comfortable with this, is they set up their administrative policies. What do I mean by that? Well, DNS policies. You've got 2 or 3 domains, likely the same. NTP servers, call home settings, a whole bunch of these policies that every time you add a domain, you need to go set it up, right? And so this is the setting up of a new domain. And what it means is instead of spending hours doing that, or writing custom scripts to go do that, which some of our customers have done, and in fact Cisco IT has done as well, to set up new domains, you can plug it in, register it, and opt in and pull all the global policies down. Your domain gets set up in minutes instead of hours or days. It also means, because you can enforce those policies, that you get consistency across those domains. One of the biggest problems we know in IT, one of the biggest sources of error is us, humans, right? How many times have you tried to enter your password and fat-fingered it and got your password wrong on your laptop, right? Well, same thing applies. Put in, hit the wrong number, putting in a DNS server, hit the, do a wrong setup. This way you set them up once, you can verify them, you can push them down to multiple domains and ensure that they stay that way and somebody doesn't accidentally change them. The other thing that we set up at that level is identifier pools. One of the first things benefits of UCS is you create your own ID pools, let's say for a UUID. And this is a great, or MAC addresses. You can set up your own ranges to do this. Works wonderfully. And one of the first comments is, I just set up my 3rd and my 4th and my 5th domain. Did any of those pools overlap between them? Do I have duplicate IDs somewhere? Well, this allows you to centralize those IDs across all of those domains. In fact, even if you don't use global IDs, even if you just register your domains to it and don't actually set this up, it will actually look across all your UCS environments and allow you to give you visibility across them. And there's even a button at the top just saying, show me the duplicates. Where might I have a duplicate ID if I've set up ID? Next one is operational policies. This is the idea of the policies that are used in the day-to-day management of your servers. This is things like, how do I connect to network? How do I connect to storage? How do I set up and want my disk scrub policy configured? Do I want to scrub disks when I decommission a server or not? What's my firmware levels need to be on these servers? All of that information, all of the personality of that physical piece of hardware can be set via policies. And so once again, instead of setting up new policies every time you create another domain, you can have them centralized, consistent, and consistent means it's standardized. Standardized, as we know from many years of experience in IT, tends to mean fewer problems. You've got 1,000 servers all configured the exact same way, and you can ensure that. First of all, it means you can spend more time testing that one configuration than you would if you had a typical environment with 1,000 servers configured hundreds of different ways. We can enforce that, it stays standard, and then when you troubleshoot it, if you run into a problem somewhere, you fix it once, and let's say it requires a firmware update, you know it can apply to the next 999 servers and solve the problem for a large environment instead of solving them one-off. Then lastly is workload mobility. The last advantage is if you take the full idea of a service profile and you now share that between domains, so between servers in different data centers. So I have let's say a service profile template for my VMware cluster. And I want this to be the same in my Silicon Valley data center and my New York data center. Why? Standardization is good. Standardization solves problems, right? Helps make it easier to troubleshoot. I want that consistency. It also means that I can take a workload running on a server over here in one rack, and if I have a different domain in the same data center, I can move that workload there. If I have a different domain in a different data center, I can move it to a different data center as well. With all the connection policies, with all the identifiers, things like that. Where's that mobility become very interesting? Well, think about it as, let's say you have a Windows workload, bare metal Windows running on a 2-socket server, and it's got a UUID, the identifier of the system. In a physical world, if you want to move that workload over to a 4-socket server, which has a different UUID, of course, in a physical environment, guess what? First thing you do is start booting it. Windows is going to start complaining about not being licensed, right? Well, for us, UUID is software defined, like all the other facets of that server. We can actually move that personality to a different data center. And guess what? Windows will boot up and be very happy because it's on the same server and the same physical server. At the end of the day, what UCS Manager does for servers and for the hardware is similar to what VMware does for the OS. Completely virtualizes it, completely makes it definable through software. UCS Central, in that picture, is maybe something more akin to vCenter, where now I can manage this across multiple servers instead of VMware on a single server, and move things around and stuff like that. But at a high level, that's why people use UCS Manager or UCS Central. So I'm going to show a demo of this in a couple minutes because I think that's probably the best way for people to experience it and see it. But I did want to highlight a couple key architecture concepts which will help people, help everybody understand what they see in the demo and why things work the way they do. So when Cisco started developing this, we looked at other manager of managers type of software, other centralized manager software. And there were two typical ways your central manager and let's call it your element manager work together. The first way was, if I put a central manager in, whatever you do, do not access the element manager. Don't touch it. You can only access the central manager. And we thought about that, and we quickly came up with the use case. Well, what if my central manager is in my San Francisco data center, but I got systems in my New York data center, and my network connection goes down? Happens, right? Everybody's seen network connections go down. Well, then you can't change anything, you can't touch anything, and you know what? I might actually need to touch something to get that connection back up. So we decided that was not a great model. The other typical model out there is you have a central manager and a element manager, and they constantly sync their data back and forth. Like, okay, this is a better model. The problem with that model is that you run into a problem somewhere in your environment, and you start troubleshooting, and the first question is, so who made the change? I don't know. Did it come from a user here, a user there? Are your users synced up between them? Now you have multiple logs to go in and change. So UCS Central took a slightly different tact on this, kind of an in-between tact. You can use either Central or UCS Manager. There will be visibility back and forth, and in fact, UCS Central uses UCS Manager to actually go out and perform all of the tasks that it wants to do. But the ownership of any item stays where it was created. So if I create a service profile in UCS Manager, that's the complete personality of a server, and I apply it, I can see it in UCS Central, but I can only change it in UCS Manager because that's where it's owned. If I create a global service profile, same type of definition in UCS Central, and I deploy it, a copy of it goes down to UCS Manager. UCS Manager actually goes out and does all the work to make it work, but the ownership stays with UCS Central. I'll see it in UCS Manager. In fact, I'll see a little green globe on it, so I know it's a global item, but I can only change it in UCS Central. And we thought that hybrid approach worked best because that gives you complete access to either level, but the ownership stays where it came from. Now, anything we've pushed down, by the way, and made a copy of, if you had to, let's say your network connection between these was down, you can actually switch the ownership on it if you wanted to and change it at this level, and then once it comes online, switch the ownership back if you wanted to. So that way, we can guarantee that, even across multiple data centers, if you lose connections, you can still change things, but you can still point them back, and you can still keep the central management most of the time. Oh yeah, and if these links go down because there's copies here, everything just keeps running the way it was in its last state. So our latest release, we'll get into in a minute. I should probably pull up the demo at this point because it's easier to see a lot of this in the demo than it is to. There we go. Okay, screen. External mouse. That would help. There we go. Okay. So for those who are not familiar with it, this is the first screen and the login screen of UCS Central. If you're familiar with it, there's one big change since the last version. We can now select our authentication domain on the login screen. So you can use LDAP, you can use native, local authentication, etc. Okay, so we're logging in, we can see our different domain groups. And here we've got UCS Central, if you've never seen it before. Pause it back here for a second. A couple of things, and I apologize in the room, it's kind of tough to see. We've got a hierarchy here. This is our domain, our equipment tab. We can see the different domain groups. So one of the concepts we've introduced here is a domain group. It's just what it sounds. If you have more than one domain in one location, you can group them together. It's usually done via physical location. Why? Because a setting like a time zone setting is probably the same for all your domains in a single data center. Have a different data center across the country, your time zone may be different. So that's where we get the chance to do some separation. And in this one, we have a domain group called Europe, a domain called London, or LHR, a USA domain group, SFO, and I can't read the other one on that screen, Maximus being the other one, that's what I thought. So we have the ability to group groups of UCS servers together. And very quickly, you can see how many are in use. You get a quick snapshot of your environment, what's being used where. In this case, we're looking at a domain. And we can cross-launch into UCS Manager very quickly and easily. From here, we can look at the logical environment. And the first thing we want to show is we're in a logical environment, and we don't have a lot of policies set up. So one of the big things we improved on this release of UCS Central is the ability to actually import policies and service profiles. So we can see we don't have a lot of network profiles set up. We don't have a lot of storage profiles set up. But this is UCS Manager. Here, we got a lot of things set up in UCS Manager. Here we're showing templates for virtual NICs, policies for our LAN VNIC templates for our virtual NICs, quality of service policies. You can see we've got all kinds of policies set up and running because most customers have started with UCS Manager. That's where they started their configuration. So the first thing we're going to show, we've got a service profile template here called SAP. And we can see we've got a host firmware policy 2.02Q, the firmware version. And the next thing we're going to do in UCS Central is go in and do a search. We can search on a number of things, type of policies, whether it's owned by UCS Central or UCS Manager, if it belongs to a particular domain group or a particular domain, or a logical organization. So we can group hardware by physical proximity, but we can do logical operations by organizations, which are more logical groups. We're just going to search for SAP. And here we find all the policies and service profile templates for SAP. This first one's a service profile template, and we're going to import that. We select the organization we want to put it in. And then we can look at, the service profile template has a whole bunch of policies potentially underneath it. Even those can have policies underneath them. But the complete definition of what a server should be, we can go look at all the dependencies and see all the individual policies. There's boot policies, BIOS policies, quality of service, firmware policies, VNIC templates, disconfig, boot config, all those types of things. The next one here, when we take a look at, will be all the resources. What VLANs, what vSANs does it connect to? And we can select whether we import all of these things. We can even see if it's in use, and this one is not at this point in time. So select that. Now, this sounds fairly straightforward. Just go import a bunch of policies. But UCS has objects and refers to objects by the name. It actually has a way it looks for those names. It starts on UCS Manager, and if you've got organizations, it starts at wherever it is in the organization tree and works up to root looking for that name. Let's say we're looking for a policy called Bob. It starts in UCS Manager looking for Bob. Doesn't find it, it then goes to UCS Central and looks for Bob. If it hasn't found Bob, it then starts looking for default back in UCS Manager. If it doesn't find a default, it goes to UCS Central and looks for global default. So the UCS Central version of default. So where this gets complicated, doing imports like this, is not actually searching for it, not actually finding it and seeing the dependencies. It's we want to make sure that you don't inadvertently change something that's looking for Bob today and can't find Bob and is finding a local default and resolving to that. And what if one of these things we imported was another policy called Bob? It ends up in the resolution. Now I've inadvertently changed the configuration of a server over here. And so the most important thing we've done is a button here, and it tells you up in red lettering in bold up there, is go run estimate impact. Because that will go through your whole environment and see if there's any changes you didn't expect. And so that's, oops, let me back here just a little bit. So estimate impact will run. We can review it, and we can see, in this case, nothing's affected. We aren't importing something and inadvertently changing a configuration somewhere else in the environment. And that, when you start thinking about a service profile that can have hundreds of policies beneath it, and sub-policies and templates and configurations all hanging beneath it, and you start thinking about this over an environment with tens or hundreds or thousands of servers, and you have to recurse this and check the whole environment for that, it was absolutely the hardest part of this feature. And now we can see we've imported it. We've got our SAP service profile template. We've got our VNix set up. We can look in the network, and we can see our SAP QoS policy, our SAP VNix template. We've imported all of these things, all of the settings, all of the personality we've set up for a server in one domain can now be shared across many domains. We can look, see our global Mac ID pools. You can see here's our actual service profile template. We can see the policies. We can see that the firmware policy is the same one as before, 2.02Q. Same as we had on UCS Manager. Second thing we've improved in this version is our administrative policies now all show up on an admin tab. Don't ask why they didn't show up in the first two releases, long before I showed up. But it makes it easier to find and set up things like our default export policy. And this one actually is our backup policy. So when I said we could schedule backups of UCS Manager and UCS Central, and what got added here is we can now push this out to a remote file share. Oops, back. In addition to a local copy. And here we just see our local file share. We started the backup. And there it is. And yeah, I was pretty sure it was going to show up because this is pre-recorded, obviously. So. Set management interfaces, by the way, if anybody's using IPv6, we'll be supporting that. Our syslog policies, certificates, fault policies, things like that. Here's our export and backup policies. Much easier to set up, users and authentication, local users, setting up our LDAP access, things like that. By the way, while we're waiting for this, here's our fault panel at the top, which shows all the faults across all of the UCS domains that are registered. One of the last things I mentioned, one of the areas we get value from UCS Central is in statistics, because we can support in a virtual machine a lot more data than we can on Fabric interconnects. So here we're seeing report on fan speed. Here's one on temperature, and it's probably very difficult to see in the room. But we can actually look at this. This one is the peak temperature. We can actually do an overlay if you wanted of average temperature. And we can look at it all the way up and down the stack. So what's the temperature of this server over a period of time? What's the temperature over this chassis? All the servers in the chassis. What's the temperature, average and peak temperature across a complete domain? 160 servers. Okay, now show me my temperatures across 3 domains or 5 domains. Maybe in the same data center, maybe in different data centers. Where can I see that problem? Power, we don't show in this one, but we have bandwidth as well. So how much bandwidth am I consuming up and down? Have I configured and set up everything correctly? And I think that's the end of the demo. So that gives you a little idea of some of the new things we put in this release to make customers running UCS more efficient, more productive, can move forward a lot easier. The big thing, we can import existing policies and service profile templates. One thing to be very, very clear about, we can import the policies and the service profile templates. At this point, we don't take a running service profile from UCS Manager and actually move it to UCS Central. So we'll do the templates, we'll do the policies, but we aren't taking an individual service profile at this point.
Is that coming?
We're thinking about how we could possibly do that, because the first thing it's going to do is break all of your pool settings. So we can take it with all the IDs, but it's not going to map to any global pools unless you've previously set it up. So we've had a couple customers ask about that, and it comes down to the only way to make it really repeatable and automatable, and it's possible, is that you have to know the environment really, really well. And it's going to be different for every customer. That makes it a little more difficult to do this as a general purpose feature. But we definitely have talked to customers who are looking at scripting that. The same type of customers who script today. We've got customers who use scripts to take service profiles and copy them from their test domain. They already, even without Central, they copy it and make a copy in their QA domain, and then move it into their pre-production domain. And then when they're satisfied there, they then move it in production, and that's all scriptable as well. So those are the types of customers who are most interested in this to start, because we can tailor it to their unique environments. We are looking at how to make this general purpose, but that's not something that we've solved yet. We know it's going to break a lot of things along the way. Sequential IDs instead of the default UCS reverse lexicographic, which just means I have no way of telling you what ID is coming up next. Copy things, scheduled backups we saw. We'll offer, for those, we use certificates to communicate back and forth. We'll allow customers to use their own third-party certificates instead of our self-signed ones for better security. IPv6 is coming. Support Microsoft SQL in addition to Oracle, in addition to Postgres databases, and then we saw some of the new reports. So that was our March release. You can expect another release coming this summer. A couple of these features I should mention for clarity, particularly ones that are starred on this one, will require a release of UCS Manager that's not quite shipping yet. And the blunt answer is the last release of UCS Manager shipped in December. We shipped this product in March, and there's a few things we put in that we had to make changes to UCS Manager that we missed the December cut for, and will show up in the next release of UCS Manager. And if anybody's running that, you shouldn't have to wait much longer for it. Should be coming fairly soon. Yeah, so policy import, one other thing to mention, browsing works with any version of supported version of UCS Manager. The actual import has to be with the December release and later. Remote actions are in there now. Sequential IDs, use local, backup to remote file share, separate settings, third-party certificates, better support for multiple versions, so you can have mix and match of different UCS Manager versions in your environment. Showed the authentication domain selection, SQL database support, and reports. One of the last things that we often get answered, especially with a fairly new product, is, hey, I want to do this that your product doesn't do today. And absolutely, we put these things on the backlog list of things we want the product to do someday, but someday doesn't help you today. So one of my colleagues, actually the guy who made the demo and wrote the best practices guide for UCS Central, got this question so many times that on about 4 cross-country plane trips, he pulled out Python and had downloaded some Python code and created a tool called UCSQL. It works with UCS Central and essentially gives you SQL-like access to everything. So it runs, I believe, in Python. You create a SQL-like request. It translates it to the XML API request for UCS Central, gets the information, and presents it back to you. So this is an example of an additional utility we provide. It is open source, so if anybody wants to help with it, they're more than welcome. But some examples before we can back up remotely. Give me a command to make copies of all my backups. And of course, if I can do this command, I can script it, I can run it as a cron job. Give me a custom inventory report. Just go pull from my inventory tables, from all my domains all over, give me a custom report. I just want some output that I can use somewhere else. One of the traits of UCS is that whenever it goes out and discovers a chassis, it puts a chassis ID on it, starting with 1007 and working up from there. Actually, in this case, it happens to be domain IDs, I believe. Tell me the name of that chassis. Give me the ID number, give me the name. Sounds simple, but often it's referred to in different ways, and it's actually stored in different places in the back-end data store. Just make it very quick, very easy to get some of that information out. So one of the nice things about this is, yeah, this is a relatively new product. It's been shipping for about 1.5 years. It doesn't do everything today that we'd like, but we've got some great utilities like this that if you need something custom, you can do it. It's one of the nice benefits, side benefits of having an XML API that's open that people can write to is if you don't like the way we've done it, you can always tweak it to make it work specifically for your environment. Licensing, UCS Central, there's an initial license for 5 domains. You're going to love the price of this license. Nothing. With the caveat, if you want support, we absolutely charge support on it. Above 5 domains, which can give you, let's see, 5 times 160, above 800 servers, potentially potentially 800 servers. We have a license on a per domain basis, and it's not outrageous. Its list price is $12,000 a domain, above that, and then support on that. And then from a resources perspective, if you're interested in UCS Central, first nice thing, and I should have mentioned this on the last slide, is you can download it today if you've got UCS and get it up and running today. It's got a 120-day trial period for every domain. You can use it for the next 4 months without ever worrying about a license. To be honest, even after 4 months, it'll still keep working. It'll just give you warning messages. If you're not familiar with UCS and UCS Central and you want to ramp up on it, the single most useful thing is the UCS communities page, communities.cisco.com/UCS. The most useful utility on there to help you ramp up is something called the UCS Platform Emulator. It is literally a virtual machine that runs UCS Manager and has hardware emulation in there. It doesn't do everything. It doesn't have LDAP. Heck, it doesn't even have authentication. You can use any username and password, and it's going to let you in. 100% guaranteed you can log into that no matter what you use. Pushing out firmware to a server doesn't work so well when there's no servers, right? Besides that, just about everything in there works the same way as UCS Manager. Probably the single best tool for learning UCS Manager. When I got to Cisco a little over a year ago, my boss happened to be traveling. By day 2, I had the platform emulator up and running, and by day 3, I learned I had a core competency in creating errors in UCS Manager. I had more red faults than I could figure out. But it's a great way of having a test dev environment, a learning environment, without committing real hardware to it. And on my laptop there, I happen to have 3 copies of UCS Platform Emulator, which gives me 3 domains, and I can simulate hundreds of servers, and UCS Central. 4 VMs can run on a laptop, so I can actually play with this and develop it in a complete sandbox environment, sitting on my laptop, without ever having to touch production hardware. A very low-risk way of learning this. One of the other neat things, and we've seen some interesting applications of this, if you have UCS, the platform emulator allows you to suck in the inventory from a UCS system. So now my emulated environment, the hardware looks the same as my real-world environment. And we've then had customers who've got creative and taken a backup of their configuration of their real-world environment and restore it on the platform emulator. So now I've got all my policies and profiles and everything. Oh yeah, it looks like my real-world environment. We actually have customers who use this for change control. So before they make a change in their real-world environment, they go make the change in the simulated environment, understand it, make sure everything works, and then they roll that change into their real-world environment. So a very useful tool, whether you're looking to use UCS Central and learn that, whether you're looking to understand UCS Manager a little better and how it works and all the profiles and policies and everything you can set up. And then last thing, if you're interested in UCS Central, the single best source, also available from the communities page, for anybody interested in setting it up, is the UCS Central Best Practices Guide, written by my colleague Jeff, who, like I said, put together this demo. And it goes into the do's, the don'ts, the warnings, the workarounds, and everything we found in that environment. Best practices, it's in there so you can set it up, get up and running, and where behavior is maybe as designed but not immediately obvious or as expected, we detail a lot of that. So you don't run into the hang-ups, and quite frankly, most of these things are things that we run into as well. And it talks about how do you migrate from an existing environment to a new environment, how do you set up a brand new environment, topics like that. So with that, that's all the things I had put together today on UCS Central. I believe we have time for Q&A now, right? Question?
About other alerts and alarms.
Yep.
You have options to set alert, margins and other alarm margins based on the health. temperature, etc. that you're collecting?
So for those on the web, the question was, can we set alerts and alarms? We actually don't do that through UCS Central.
Okay.
What alerts we do send come from UCS Manager, and the reason is, if UCS Manager creates an alert, it's faster for it to send it to your monitoring tool than to try to send it to a central management tool and then forward it on, right? It's quicker to go direct, right?
Yeah.
We realize that it's not quite as convenient because now if you've got 5 domains, you have to set up 5 links, but that's where the alerts are set. I don't believe that we actually do health monitoring alerts. So we do some alerts, but I don't think health monitoring on temperature and things like that.
But you're looking at the total, functional alerts.
Yeah. So we're looking at more like, hey, I tried to deploy the service profile and I asked for an ID from this pool or Mac ID pool, and there's no IDs left, right? Or something happened in UCS Manager. Those are the faults you would see summarized on the top of the screen all the time.
But the central will keep all the record from each UCS Manager of what all these things we just now talked about.
Yeah. So
it keeps the whole.
UCS Central doesn't keep the record.
Okay.
We actually keep all the records in UCS Manager, and there's a good reason for that.
Okay.
And that is the way we do alerts is it's not a one-time alert that just goes into a log and stays there. What it is, it's a real active live alert object at all times, and as soon as it's corrected, it disappears. So that's why it's always kept in UCS Manager, because that's what has to make, even from Central, it makes the changes. What we actually show is the summary of it in UCS Central, and then when you click on the alert, so we'll show you, okay, for this domain, here's all my alerts categorized. Click on it, it'll launch it in UCS Manager in context. So it's not asking to log in again, it's saying, okay, here's your exact alert, but because it's owned by UCS Manager, we keep it there. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Well, yeah, there's the Prime Network Service Controller. Does that work with the Center? Central?
Yeah, so the question was Prime Network Services Controller.
Yeah, does that work with the Central?
I won't say it won't work, but I'm not aware of any specific integration with UCS Central and that other product. So I don't know, but I don't believe there's any specific work that's being done. So
how does that fit? How does the BMSC fit into this whole picture?
I do not know. I don't know that product well enough to know how they might work together. Sounds like it's a management tool more on the network side. I'm not familiar with that area.
Yeah, well, it's a management tool, but in Central it's also.
Yes.
So,
but they manage different things. So. Question.
Can you back up and restore the entirety of the configurations that Central manages?
Yes, so UCS Central can back up itself, including all the configurations, and restore itself, if you need to.
So you could do configurations for multiple pods for the names. You might not want to, but there might be cases where you would want to, like setting up a duplicate environment.
Yeah. So the question. So this is not so much. So the question was, can we make duplicates? Use backup and restore to make duplicates. The answer is you wouldn't do that. You would do that through Central, but it wouldn't actually be a Central backup. What you would do is use Central to back up UCS Manager, create the backup, and then restore it on a different UCS Manager. Okay. And that would get you to the point you're talking about. Okay. Question in the back. So the question was, how is Central different than UCS Dashboard? My understanding, because I wasn't around when UCS Dashboard was created, was Dashboard was really a high-level overview of multiple domains. UCS Central really is the next generation product of that. So Dashboard was kind of a short-term, just give me some visibility, mostly inventory and maybe some faults. Whereas UCS Central, we can actually do ID management, we can do policy management, we can have global service profiles, we can move, do all the actions you would get from UCS Manager, where Dashboard was really just that. It was a dashboard overview of some of the key things in UCS, in multiple UCS managers. So call it an early predecessor to UCS Central. So the question was, UCS Central give you more real-time data than the UCS dashboard? In theory, yes. But the reality is that data all comes from UCS Manager. UCS Manager will still see it first, and then I don't remember what the refresh cycle of UCS Dashboard was, how often it queried it. Most data we query in UCS Central, we sync up inventory and things like that, usually every 30 seconds. So it could be out of whack by 30 seconds. Maybe even, if it's checking, periodically, maybe even up to a minute. But usually it's sub 30 seconds. So, but if it misses an update, it could be a little bit longer, but that's about the timeliness you should expect. Question?
If I'm training a group of professionals, or on the job training, like you went through, you give an example, is there a way I can, is it already scripted version available for me to know how well are the trainees doing? How well are the professionals like you were, once upon a time you were learning it on your own, or whatever it is.
Yep.
At least we know the learning curve and so on, so that next time we can improve our training program.
Yeah. So the question for those online was, is any of this scripted for use in a training program and things like that?
To know how well they are
to know how well they're doing.
individuals, yeah.
So not in and of the product itself.
Okay.
Having said that, we did just create for Cisco Live in Australia a whole bunch of hands-on labs and demos to teach people how to do this. And so we're making that available to our training partners. And hopefully that will start being incorporated. We actually have a virtual environment, which, funny enough, multiple platform emulators, plus UCS Central, plus an external database, all running as virtual machines. And so we've actually used that for training. And if that's something of particular interest, we'll take it offline. We could potentially leverage that.
Sure.
And it's an environment that, literally we were holding classes in the Cisco office and had, partners in, had Cisco employees in, and each of them had their own environment they could go work on, and we can leave it up for another week. And we do this for other products. We do this for UCS Manager training, Power Tool, and all kinds of other things.
And then we can give you that input also of what we went through.
Oh, absolutely.
Go back to the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Question over there.
A question, have you mentioned about the integration with VMware? So the integration with VMware happens at the director level, not at the UCS Central level, between vCenter and the UCS Central. And is there that the user interfaces can be plugged in into vCenter to make a single pane?
So the question for those online was, how does vCenter interact with the UCS management technologies? I'll just leave that, because it does interact in a few different ways. From a UCS Director orchestration tool, it can link into vCenter and provision virtual machines. It can provision hosts, just like it can provision a Windows OS, right? On a physical server and everything else. And it sits above UCS Central from a management stack type of perspective. We also have integrations between vCenter and the VMware products directly with UCS Manager at this time. So the one place it doesn't directly integrate yet is UCS Central. But it integrates at UCS Manager, so you can get a lot of the hardware capabilities and things like that. It integrates at Director. We are looking at this as something that we want to add into UCS Central as well, so that I can take multiple vCenters and plug them into UCS Central. But if you look at those integrations, you'll see it's very robust, and you can get a lot of Cisco UCS data, a lot of actions, and perform a lot of tasks directly out of vCenter if that's your management platform of choice. And we've got lots of customers doing that. But in that environment, you probably would forego UCS Central and plug it directly into UCS Manager. So there would still be advantages to using Central from the benefits of Central, but it wouldn't interact with vCenter directly. Question over here?
I was going to ask you, with UCS Central, how do you
Do you have issues when you have different time zones and in different cities like Singapore?
Yep.
Can you still use that? Because I keep everything local.
Yep.
Because I'm afraid to do global
stuff. Yep. So the question was, for those online, what if you have data centers in different cities, and how can you set up settings? So one of the things I pointed out in the demo was we had this concept of domain groups. And the idea of domain groups is physical location. So we had an Americas and a Europe domain group. We had inside the Americas a Maximus and a San Francisco domain group. And let's imagine they're in different time zones. From the administrative policy setting on those domains, you can have some policies that are global. Your call home settings might be the same across different continents, right? How often do I get alerted, things like that. But your time zones definitely are different. So you can have policies at the root domain group that apply everywhere. And then as you go into your main group and your separate domains, I can still, through UCS Central, carve out specific policies for that domain, like time zone. So a great example, because they're both on the same screen. I could have NTP servers setting at root, because that's the same for my whole company, but time zones for different data centers. They're both related to time. I can set them up and configure them as I need.
So you're just supposed to go in and select which ones are local and which ones are global, right? So
well, this is actually using it all global. These would be global. If you went in and selected the policies to do local, it would be whatever you set local. But this way you can still do centralized, globalized management, but still have customization for those features you want customized. You can actually customize all of them, but what we see mostly is, you know what, I got 80% the same, but I need to tweak 20% for each data center, or 5%, or whatever that number is. That's how we typically see it. So yes, we absolutely allow you to separate it out by physical location. And then the other thing, from a logical thing, within an organization, you could have logical organizations. That's our orgs feature. You know, finance group, an HR group, a manufacturing group that you want to separate out and not give visibility to the other groups about. You don't want your HR team knowing how many servers your legal department has, right? They don't get visibility, and you can separate it out, and they can't see each other that way as well.
Oh, you can separate it out?
You can logically, so those would be logical organizations, and you can have policies and service profile templates and things that apply to the logical organization, and they can actually share physical hardware, or have hardware in the same physical group, but they still can't see each other because they're logically separate. Another great example, VLANs. You can have some VLANs for the legal department, different VLANs for your HR department, and you don't want them to be able to see each other and even know those VLANs exist, except in theory, right? So we can separate them both ways. So the physical attributes we can separate physically, the logical attributes and settings we can separate logically.
Also, I have another question, it's kind of a little bit different. I was going to ask you, is there a way to audit from the UCS Central to see which users are logging in Tokyo, which users are logging in Singapore, and San Jose, to see what changes are being made?
So the question was auditing, and can you see which users where? So in Central, we keep the audit log for Central, which is which users logged into Central, and we don't know where they've logged in from, but we know the username and the password, and very often it's connected to LDAP, so we just cache not so much the username and password, but here's the LDAP authenticated user. And that's usually traceable back to who the actual user is. We don't actually move the audit logs from UCS Manager to UCS Central, so people logging into the individual domains directly, that is audited on that domain, not from UCS Central.
But you can see from UCS Central who's logging in, correct?
We can see who's logging into UCS Central from UCS Central. We can't see the UCS Manager domains from UCS Central from an audit perspective, but the logs are there. They're logged in both places, so you log in one or the other, there is a log that captures who it is.
Okay, got it.
And your centralized policy can be, make sure you use on all these domains, use LDAP, disable native authentication. Here's the user, you have to use LDAP. Here's the users who have permissions. Okay, push that out, so I have a global policy that everybody has to log in via LDAP, and then it makes it very easy to trace back, right?
Yeah.
You don't have somebody logging in as the local admin because you can disable that, right?
Okay.
And that's very often where you're running into problems. So it's not, Joe in Singapore did this. It's somebody logged in with the admin username, logged in as root and made a change, and we don't know who it was, right? So you can avoid that problem.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Well, if not, I know we've got another speaker, so I will turn it over. And I'll be around for a little while, so if anybody wants to have questions offline, I'm happy to do so.
Hi, I'm Gopi Subramanian. I work with WinMax Corporation.
Did you need any slides?
No, thank you. I didn't have time to put some slides together. I wish I did. We are the official sponsors for this event today, and let me thank you for attending the session. And we are doing a lot of consulting services with Cisco and other companies, and we have been with Cisco for over 9 years. Specifically, what I would want to talk to you today is just a quick brief on where this whole UCS and the data center environment is going. If anyone is in from big data applications or analytics or...
Yeah. Okay,
there you go. We are working with our partners with Paraxel. Paraxel is columnar computing. So they have partnered with Cisco, Cisco's infrastructure to implement a Paraxel solution for big data computing. So today, if you really look at the world where it is going, is with all the data centers and the immense power of computing, massive parallel processing is where everything is going. You have so much of data, if either it's web logs or Amazon logs, or you can look at trillions and terabytes of data. How do you process that information? You need an infrastructure to support that, because today's data processing is not relational database environment anymore. Yeah, you'll have a lot of data in the relational database, but if you're going to kickstart an SQL query, it's going to take several hours before John Chambers gets the results. So you need to have an environment where it is hooked up to the hardware, the network, and the software. Software being the Paraxel, and the hardware and the networks is the UCS environment. So if you look up or Google Paraxel with UCS, you'll find a lot of content. I wish I had brought some slides together. So that's one of the specific application areas, and also Cisco's UCS is also used in Pivotal HD. That's one of the VMware products where they are partnering with Cisco to implement big data solutions. So
can you give examples of what verticals you have done big data solutions?
We are doing for some semiconductor companies today. We're using Paraxel.
Is that in the manufacturing?
Manufacturing.
So manufacturing infrastructure? Or is it all the robotics and the automation?
No, it's more on the data side. The ERP application.
Oh, yeah. We can talk after.
Okay. So if anyone is interested in connecting up with us, and getting to know more about Paraxel and UCS infrastructure usage, I have my business card out there. Please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm also on LinkedIn with the same name, Gopi Subramanian. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sponsoring us today. Thank you so much for sponsoring us today.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. It's a pleasure.
Okay. I think the last one, last item we have on the agenda is to draw the raffle ticket. So we have maybe invite Jacob and also Alex from. So maybe we first draw the yours ticket. I mean yours. Sorry, yours
$50 Visa card.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, WinMax got a $50 Visa gift card.